Thanks for joining us. My name's Trevor, a general manager here at the nursery. I'm in Everett, pretty close by. Today it's ever wet. I got a 9-foot umbrella over my head here, so hopefully we'll stay dry. But we're going to teach you a bunch about pruning today. Run a little slideshow. I got some plants here beneath me. I got some branches to show you, so we'll see if we can give you a couple of pruning tips. Hopefully everybody got access to the handout. It's not a 5-page soliloquy like usual, just a little shorter and sweeter, but at least it'll give you some good tips to refer back to. And also reminding this is recorded, so if you're not tired of looking at my bald head, you can turn around and go watch this again here in a couple hours. So we'll post it up on our YouTube channel this afternoon, and it'll be there for all eternity until we do this again next summer. So again, thanks for joining us. I'm going to just start with the slideshow here. Then we'll start doing some chopping. So give me a second. There we go. There's me. So if we first talk about tools a little bit, we kind of carry a nice selection of basic tools at Sunnyside at the nursery. I have a lot of these in my garage. I brought a few of mine out in case anybody asks what I use here at my house. But we need to get the right tool for the right job. So a couple simple little hand pruners, a bypass pruner. I got mine on the holster here, the old Felco #2s. Zenport is an excellent knockoff. We carry a nice range of quality Zenports, and now instead of $80, $90, $100 for a pair of pruners, pretty similar quality Zenport, you're looking at more like $40 a pair of pruners. So a little bit easier on the pocketbook. The green one on the right, there's a ratchet pruner. Maybe, the easiest way to explain it is if, I've got huge hands, so I was lucky, the man blessed me, I can kind of squeeze just about anything. But if I have a problem squeezing all the way into prune, the ratchet allows me to click, 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 and sever that branch. So sometimes a good pair of quality ratchet pruners might be a little bit easier on the hand and the wrist, might be something to consider. We have loppers there, the blue ones. We carry an aluminum handle one. It's a little lighter weight, but it's got a very heavy, sharp forked blade. So those are very sharp, very useful. We carry 2 sizes, and there's a long one if you like your old loppers to get in and cut some larger branches, but I really like our mini loppers, we call them. It's a shorter version. They're great for roses, great for berries, great for a lot of plants. If we don't have something so huge, we don't have to have as much leverage to kind of squeeze that. So take a look at our loppers as well. On the right, there's the pole pruner. And that's a great tool. I use quite a bit in my own yard. I volunteer down at the Arboretum a lot and do pruning on very large trees. I've got a telescoping handle. I can get up, 14, 15 feet and get very accurate cuts with the lopper part of it, or attach the blade and do some sawing up in the crowns as well. So if you don't have a good pole pruner, that's a great one to me. You pay for what you get. If you buy a cheap little plastic thing, it's probably not going to last very long. I got tired of replacing them every couple of years. So you can see the difference with this is chain. That's not rope on the mechanism, but that's chain. So I've got something very heavy duty, and I can cut some large ones. I'm probably on 6 years now with my last quality one I finally decided to buy. And I plan on having it last a lifetime. So we keep it sharp, keep it dry. It's a very useful tool. We do have some of those at the store. The high-end one, if you really want to get one and never replace it. We also have one that's a little bit smaller, a little less expensive as well. A little giraffe pruner. Sometimes people like that, or long reach pruner. You got a little handle at the end. You can kind of extend it out and do some clipping. Sometimes that's a little hard on the back, I think, for some gardeners. So that's not one we carry a lot of at our place. But certainly a useful tool if that's something that you can handle. Head shears, I laugh because that's exactly what I got here from my garage. But head shears, very easy to use. I'm not a big chainsaw on the stick guy. Maybe I should call myself the carbon neutral gardener. I don't like a lot of power, like battery powered things, and doing the hand pruning. So sometimes the head shears are very easy to use on a lot of the boxwoods, different evergreens that we want to get a nice tight clip to. Those have a telescoping handle, which is why I like them too. So I can extend it out just a little bit farther, get a little farther away without getting on the ladder. So Right there, I think is the key one, that sharpener, that funny little orange handle thing. I've got one in my garage. In fact, I've got two. My wife stole the first one for the kitchen because you can use it on knives and things too. But this is a great little sharpener. We sell 100 of these a year at the nursery. If I've got a typical set of hand pruners, I can whip this out at any time and just run this along my blade to keep my hand pruners, loppers. You can use them on head shears, anything nice and sharp. I like this because it's easy to use, and I've also got a little handle screw here. I can put some 3-in-1 oil in there if I want to have some lubricant, that I can kind of get my mechanisms on the pruners, keep them nice and loose. So that is a sharpener from Zenport that we have at Sunnyside. That's a fabulous little sharpener. I think they're like 15 bucks, and plus they're on special here for the class we'll talk about later. That's a really useful sharpener. And then pocket saws, I use that probably more than anything these days in my yard. And it sounds kind of funny, but it's a great little surgical tool. I have a couple different sizes of them. You can see a long one and a little mini me. But this little pocket saw, I keep in my pocket most of the time I'm working. It comes in a little plastic holster. You can clip it on the belt. But that's a very sharp, little easy to use saw. I can get into really tight little places and make very accurate cuts. To me, this maybe takes the place of sometimes loppers, where you got a tough time getting into somewhere in a multi-stem shrub, trying to get a clean cut. It's all about leverage. This saw, I can dive into a nice little tight area and get a large piece of that plant removed and cut very accurately without leaving a lot of stubs or anything. Now, if we get into, I got some plants here we'll show you and some branches, but if we just kind of talk some basics of pruning, pinching back is easy. If I had the camera down, you could see my pots on my patio here with geraniums, different annuals in them. And yes, I've already deadheaded them and I'll continue to all summer. But as we spend flowers, it's really easy to pinch back, or grab a really little useful pair of snips. If you want to make your life easy, this is the same pair I have in my garage. I can snip in and deadhead flowers to keep things blooming. So pinching will keep our annuals and some perennials very tight and compact, and also deadhead them so that we can maximize our flower through the rest of the summer and the fall. Shearing, excuse me, I put boxwood on there. That's a real common one most people know. This could be, an arborvitae hedge, Japanese holly, English laurel. There's all kinds of plants that we utilize kind of as a hedge. The biggest difference with these plants are, if I looked at a stem of boxwood, the buds are so close together. I don't have to sit there for 2 hours and try to prune a leaf here and there. I can take my hedge clippers and shear that off. And because I'm kind of cutting it a little indiscriminately, but I'm going to come close to a bud and I'm going to have a nice even cut, a new flush of growth. And if you're an OCD gardener like me, you'll have a nice tidy look with the boxwood, because I have a bunch of those on the other side of the house. So second, the two main ones that we probably think about most here are thinning and heading back. So if I have, a typical branch, we'll look at some here after the slideshow, but if I look at a branch that's very bushy, it's very thick, maybe it's on a tree, and I want to open it up, many of you that are at my classes will hear me say air circulation, sunshine, opening up that center of the plant is always going to help. A lot of times you're just removing dead wood and keeping that crown healthy. So if I'm going to thin out, I'm going to pick certain branches that I can just remove all the way to the trunk and open up that whole plant structure. We'll see some pictures of that as well. Heading back is where I'm going to change the direction of the plant. That's a little bit different. If I've got a branch, maybe I planted it too close to my front door and now I can't get in my front door, I need to head that branch back or remove it all the way to the trunk. But if I'm going to head it back, I can cut it back to a point to redirect the growth a different direction. So it's the same thing if, someone's going to ask, well, don't top your trees. Yes, I would not top my trees ever, but that's the same principle. If I take the tall shade tree and all of a sudden I whack it off, I've headed the tip of that plant back, and what's going to happen? Do I get another tip that takes over? Does it change the direction? Typically, we ruin a large tree by doing that. So heading back is going to change our direction a little bit. Excuse me. Now, just, we're not going to turn this into a botany class here today, but, just some kind of diagrams to kind of get you familiar. You can go back and look at these pictures. Very simple, kind of old school ones I've had for years. But these are ones that'll kind of explain to you different kinds of buds on a typical branch of any plant and some basic structure of a little plant. When we talk about central leader and side branching, water sprouts and suckers and different things, what do we want to keep? What do we want to do our pruning on? A big one with me, I think most people can look at a tree and kind of maybe figure out what they don't like and what they want to get rid of. But looking at those branches, if you're going to take the time to prune, look at your different types of buds on those branches and prune it accordingly. If I look at that simple little twig diagram there, I've always got a terminal or apex bud. That's what's giving me length, and it's going to keep going until I tell it not to. And that's the same as if it was an apical bud. Well, it's the crown of my plant that goes straight for the sun. The big one to me are the lateral and latent buds. So if I look on the sides of the stems, some plants will be opposite. A hydrangea, if I look at the stem of a hydrangea right now, I'm going to see little pairs of buds that are opposite each other. So if I prune or head back to that point, now I get two shoots that take off and I've got a fuller, bushier plant. Other ones are opposite. Take a rose. Right now, the roses are starting to bloom. I've got a central stem and I've got a bud on the left, then one on the right, then one on the left, and it keeps going up. When I head that back or deadhead that rose, I want to try to prune it down above one of those side buds going to the outside. I don't want it going to the inside. And I think a lot of gardeners do the right thing, probably do the pruning the right way, but they cut that stem down and don't look where that bud is. So we'll see a picture of it here in a second, but I pruned that bud, and then again, I get the growth, the shape that I want to keep that center open, get the sun in there, and keep my air circulation up. So there's some cuts right there. You can kind of see, I would always try to cut 45 degrees. I won't prune my finger, but if I had my pruners out here and I cut it flat, is it the end of the world? Probably not. But as the rain's coming down today, and especially in the wintertime, I'm leaving a flat surface for water to sit on, perhaps cause a little bit of rot, to maybe kill some of that wood back, especially again during the winter. So I'm always going to try to cut 45 degrees, and you can see by those pictures, opposite bud, or alternate buds. Again, I can see the different pattern on those canes. I'm going to not leave a stub. I don't want to cut it right against those buds because those won't grow. The next ones will, and now I'll have a little dead stub. So again, things like roses, hydrangeas, and a zillion different plants we can talk about. That's your wood structure. And by heading it back to that point, cutting 45 degrees and getting it to the right side, that's going to make all the difference in the world for our plant long term. Now, if we just look at some basic diagrams, and I snap my fingers and it's the middle of winter and we have no foliage, so it's really easy to see. These are tips that we would use in our winter pruning seminars as well. But if you look at the crown of a typical tree, again, I'm not a tree topper. I want to let that tree attain its natural beauty. So if I look at that first set of diagrams, that is perfection to me. I've got a tree. There's not necessarily anything wrong with it. It's a little bit crowded. You can see there's a couple branches that probably needed to go. Then I get done with my thinning. I'm not heading it back. I'm not butchering it. I'm not topping it, but I've thinned it out. Look at the difference. I've got a great structure. I've got air and I've got sun. That's a great diagram to kind of picture if you stand back and look at that big tree in the yard, whether it's conifer, a shade tree, Japanese maple, flowering tree of any kind. That'll kind of give you a little tutorial on what to look for. On the right there, we're heading back, and I would lean this more towards fruit trees. We're not trying to get a gigantic 30-foot apple that I have to get a picking machine to get on top to get my fruit every summer. We want that crown. We don't need a leader, so we want that crown to spread out and stay maybe a little bit lower. So that's when we can head back, encourage growth the angles we want, and keep that tree down and more of a spreading type crown. So that could be a lot of other trees as well, but in particular, a great idea for fruit. Now, if we look at large limbs, I'm not in the need to take any off in my yard here this time of year, but sometimes in the winter, we get a little windstorm, something happens, and we've got to get a large limb out. We can do that. Yes, maybe we use a chainsaw or a large saw, bow saw, any kind. The big thing is, don't walk out and look at that limb and just slam your saw down and start cutting. If I cut through, the weight's going to snap it, crack it, and it's going to peel, and I'm going to damage my bark. I don't want my skin ripped off, and that tree doesn't either. So let's get underneath it, make a notch, then flop onto the top, cut it off, get rid of the limb, and then our third cut, we can go back and get a nice, tidy, flat cut to the collar of where that branch was so that it heals properly. So I see it all the time in my neighborhood, you know, with a little branch. So I'm going to get rid of that branch and limb my tree up, which is a great idea for garden underneath, but don't slap that saw down and sever that big limb. A lot of that weight, you're not going to be able to handle it, will snap, crack, and then we'll end up doing some damage to the bark. A lot of plants up here are multi-stem, you know, and this again is a little easier to see in the winter, but this can be done, you know, thinning it's a great time to thin plants here as we head in late spring, early summer. So this could be a blueberry, it could be a vine maple, it could be barberry, it could be so many different things in our yard. If we look at that shrub and I've got more than one stem coming out to kind of that little vase-shaped multi-stem look, you know, I can maybe dig at the base first, look at the bottom of it and say, hey, what would happen if I got rid of this one branch all the way out of there? Does that open up the structure? Because if I dive into the middle and start cutting everything back 4 or 6 inches, I'm just going to have a bushier, thicker mess as that plant develops. So yes, I know some people like the chainsaw on the stick. You can just hedge that thing off and make your ice cube or triangle or whatever your thing is. That's fine. It's your plant. But if you want to let this kind of attain its natural shape and some beauty, try thinning it out at the base, removing 1 or 2 stems, leaving that structure open, and then stand back and say, will that fix my problem? Or you know what, if I do a little here and a little there, I'm back to even, and then off we go for another season. Now there's just a couple tree issues, you know, again, probably more so in the winter than in the summer, but you know, you can see crossing branches, you can see bad angles, water sprouts, suckers, maybe a broken limb. A big one right now, maybe to me, is I will do this in my yard here in June and early July, is looking up into those old trees, whether it's a big, huge lilac that I'm looking at here, or Japanese maple, or any kind of tree. What wood does not have leaves on it? I can get that dead wood out of there right now because I might not be able to tell as much in the winter when all the leaves are gone. So look up in those crowns and say, I got my pull pruner out. A lot of times I can just grab it with the hook and just kind of lightly tap down, and those old dead wood will pop out of there. I can clean it up and I've got a brand new tree again. Now, a couple rules that I hope everybody kind of learns today. And yes, we can break some of these, and I have broken them before myself. But a couple good ones to remember is the 1/3 rule. You know, I'm never gonna probably do any permanent damage to my plant if I stick to 1/3 of height or 1/3 of spread in the season. Now I'll raise my hand, I'll raise both of them because I think I've broken it with most of the rhododendrons around this yard when I bought it 20 years ago. And there's plants you can get away with that. Everyone's shaking their head like, yeah, what kind of lies is he telling? I cut my rhodie to the ground and it took a couple of years and here it came again. So there's plants we can get away with it, but I'm always going to be safe if I do the 1/3 rule. Maybe you can ask us if I got to start this over. Can I cut this to the ground and see what happens? There's some things we can get away with that as well. The big one for me is prune after bloom. You know, we try to do these pruning classes, you know, one in the fall, usually November, kind of going into winter, one in the dead of the winter, and then this one is early summer. Well, not quite summer yet, one more week, right, Nicole? But we're almost there. And the gist of this class to me would be all these beautiful treasures that we've had blooming in our yards for the last 2, 3, 4 months coming out of winter. Now is the time to prune. I'm not going to walk out and get my rhododendron, my azalea, all the rest of this stuff in the late summer, fall, winter, or I got no flower next year. So this is the time of year we want to get those plants that just bloomed. And as we go through the season, I think that's a great rule to live by for the most part. Now, I'll say a couple little disclaimers here on those last two. No, there's not some magic garden Bible that says I got to prune everything in my yard every year. You know, that's not what this class is about. Let the plant tell you if it needs pruning. Is it too big? What is your purpose? You know, it's easy with some things I want more berries. I want more fruit. I want to eat a bunch of blueberries on this Florida pot I'm looking at right here. So I'm going to prune it that way so that I get the production I want. I want more flowers. Is it diseased? Is the neighbor suing me because I'm blocking their view of the water? You know, whatever the case is, have a reason to prune. It doesn't mean like, okay, I'm going to take my hedge clippers out and cut everything in my yard every early summer. That's not what this class, I'm hopefully you're not going to get that taught that today. Let the plant tell you it needs to be pruned and have a purpose. Why are we doing it? You know, the last one there, you know, attack issues in the dormant season. You know, structure issues are a little bit harder to see sometimes when we're full of foliage. You know, like I said, it's easy to look up right now and see a little bit of dead wood in the crowns of the trees and different shrubs, and we get that taken care of, you know, easy. You know, structure issues, sometimes we can see them easy. Great, do it right now, get it done with. Other times we walk out in December, January, February. That's what we talk about more in the winter time, is trying to correct some of those structure issues where I can get rid of crossing branches, more dead wood, you know, whatever the case is. You know, a big one to me is evergreens. You know, we're going to talk a lot about rhodies, azaleas, camellias, pieris, all the staple evergreen shrubs that we enjoy in our climate. You know, this is the time of year I have to get it done. If I wait too long, I cut my flower buds off. So we want to get these out right now, done, so we can set flower buds and then enjoy the flower again in 2023. It's the same situation with the hedges, you know, boxwood, laurel, we all got different broadleaf evergreens. We want to hide our neighbor, have a little cute hedge by the porch, whatever it is. Get that stuff done here by midsummer. I would never walk out in September, October, November, anytime in the winter and prune evergreen plants. You're asking for foliage damage and you're going to look like you've pruned it the entire winter because we don't have enough season left for it to prune, regrow, harden off, and be good to go for the next season. I mean, when it comes down to it, you know, if we opened up the Webster's and said, what's the definition of pruning? You know, that's kind of an interesting question to contemplate. But what is the purpose? The purpose is I want to get rid of some growth I don't want and create new growth that I do want. So whenever I prune, I want to get new foliage and I'm going to get that plant started over again. So sometimes a little food will help, but the gist of it is that new growth, I have to have enough season left to grow up, harden off, and then I'm safe again for the next year. If I do this in September, we don't have enough season left for that little boxwood to flush out a pretty new leaf and get hardened off so that it's safe for the winter. I see a lot of times driving around here, old houses with laurel hedges, whatever it is, that got clipped late summer, fall. Now we've got dead brown areas. We look horrible through the winter. Yes, in the spring, they tend to kind of get going again and maybe it covers it up. But to me, you're taking an unnecessary chance of that not happening. Now, a couple new slides I added this year because I think these are really important things to consider. You know, knowing your plants and how they bloom. So I think most of us that care about our yards, I'm guessing because you joined us today that you care about your yard. So you care about your yard, you probably saw that rhodie bloomed last month and this little azalea just finished now and all these different things we'll talk about. You know, knowing when they bloom is half of this, but knowing how they bloom is part of this. So old wood versus new wood is huge. You know, if we take an easy example, I keep bringing up rhododendron. You know, that's an old wood blooming plant, along with a lot of other things, dogwood, magnolia, azaleas, lilacs, and we'll go on and on. If I prune too late in the season, I don't have enough time for that plant to set flower buds, and I'm going to skip 2023 flowering. A lot of people call in the winter, I want to go out and prune my dogwood tree, my flowering cherry, my magnolia. Well, it's not going to hurt the plant, but if I cut that back in the winter, I'm cutting off most of my one-year-old wood from last year and all my flower buds, and I don't have the show that I would anticipate for that season. Again, it's not going to hurt the plant, but I would rather have you let that magnolia bloom its little heart away, and then right when it's done, do what you want to it. You know, now I got the summer to send up growth, set a flower bud, old wood, and then boom, I've got flowering the next year. So keep that in mind. If you're not sure, ask us. We can tell you what's old wood, what's new wood. You can probably find that on the magic internet too. That's an easy one. The second half of that's new wood bloom, and these are kind of the easy no-brainers. There's a lot of easy examples. We could think of it a perennial of any kind, all that. I'm going to start out, I'm going to grow, and I'm going to set a flower bud immediately. But there's a lot of good shrubs that grow that way too. Roses, great example. I could have an old 4-foot rose, cut it down to a foot in March, feed it, off we go. And what do I get? Flower that same season. I can cut that one back a little bit more. Most hydrangeas these days are like that. I cut that back in March, it grows up, it sets flower buds, and boom, I enjoy the summer full of flower. Daphnes, lavenders. I can go on and on. There's a lot of good shrubs that are new wood bloomers, but I think a key to this, knowing when to prune and how to prune properly, is discovering, is that plant blooming on old wood or is it blooming on new wood? Now, some things that I would look at, well, I think we're less than a week to solstice, so we'll still call this late spring, early summer, right around the cusp. So if we look at what things I would look at doing right now, and I've got some done in my yard already, I've got plenty to do, trust me. If I pan the camera around, you go like, that needs a prune, that needs a prune, there you go. But all broadleaf plants, so whether it's hedging, laurel, boxwood, Japanese holly, on and on and on, anything that keeps its foliage through the winter, this is the time of year I want to prune. Now, if it's a summer bloomer, maybe Escallonia, something else, no, I don't want to go prune it right now. I'm going to cut my flowers off. But most of the stuff that just bloomed in spring is a massive percentage of our broadleaf staple evergreens up here. So I want to do that right now. Conifers, I'll show you a couple here when we're doing the slideshow. But if I'm going to prune my evergreens, my needly conifer creatures, we got to get that done here. Coming out of winter, we could have probably done it a month ago even, but pines put out their candles, and all these guys have pruned out their new growth. We got to get our conifers pruned this time of year. I like to thin my maples. This is a great time of year, especially on a rainy day. You can probably see my purple ghost in the background there, and it's a nice big basement tree, but now that it's all wet, it's kind of hanging. So that's one I'll look at this summer going, okay, if I do a little bit of thinning here and there, more sun, more air, I get the weight up a little bit, and then on my trees a little bit more upright. So a lot of times, especially this year in a wet spring, a lot of growth came on some of these trees, and maybe they are a little bit heavy. If we thin them out, we get them back up a little bit. All spring blooming shrub. This is the main thing today. Rhodies, azaleas, pieris, viburnum, anything that bloomed here in the springtime. This is the time of year we want to get that done. And we could even, go back a month or 6 weeks even on some of this as it bloomed a little bit earlier, but we're still not too late right now. Spring blooming trees. I mentioned the dogwood, magnolia, cherries, plums, crabapples. We can go on and on. A lot of those plants just bloomed coming out of winter. All the growth that grows this year sets flower buds that I get to enjoy again next year for flower. So if I wait and do this late summer, next winter, I'm going to cut off a big chunk of my flowering potential. Let's get that tree headed back and thinned out right now so that I have the summer to give me healthy growth, set my flower buds, and then I get to enjoy that again in 2023. Lavenders is a huge one. I brought a lavender in here, and I can't tell you how many people are like, why is my lavender all woody and gnarly? I want it to look like squim, the big pin cushions of lavenders that are perfection. That is pruning, and we'll give you a couple tips on lavender. And then spireas, that's a really common, I think really easy to grow shrub for a lot of homeowners, and a lot of different colors of foliage, different blooms. That's a really easy plant to prune. I don't use my head shears on a lot of shrubs, but that's one I'm not going to spend an hour on with my hand pruners and do this for 2 days. I'm going to take the head shears and clip that back when it's done flowering here this month. It'll look like I pruned it. Now I'm going to get new growth, beautiful foliage again, like spring, and a whole nother set of bloom. So if you want to double your pleasure from the spirea, get that thing pruned after bloom one time, and we'll have a whole nother bloom coming mid-late summer into fall. Now, a couple quick kind of side notes, because I think a lot of people, maybe when we do some questions here at the end, are going to ask a little bit about berries and some fruit trees. And this isn't something we've talked a whole lot about here at this time of year in this class. but I thought we'd probably bring it up this time because I'm anticipating with how many people are home growing their own, that there's going to be some questions. What do I do in the summer? It's been so wet. I got a 4-foot shoot out of my apple tree already. Don't feel alone. That's the way these plants grow, but we can kind of get a head start on winter if we kind of know where to start with. So berries. Now, we're not going to do a lot of pruning on berries in summer, but let's say we want to rejuvenate. Let's pick raspberries. You know, a lot of plants like berries, strawberries are the same way. We have everbearing and we have June bearing. Now, we'll talk about this in the berry class again next winter, but if I have a June bearing variety, one big crop, I need all that old wood to produce that season. I think that would make sense to most people. If I have everbearing, all that old wood gives me my June crop, but then I get more wood that grows that current season that blooms in August, September, and I get a whole nother crop, if that makes sense. So keep that in mind as you're out there like, wow, the raspberry reached 6 foot, it's hanging on my walkway. Well, yeah, we can cut it back. It's not going to hurt the plant, but maybe I want to stick that up so I can pick that extra fruit this fall or extra berries. So that's a tough one to kind of choose. Do I thin it? Do I head it back? Do I leave it alone? Just kind of keep that in mind. You know, maybe one other tip with blueberries in particular, you know, we're never clipping blueberries back like a little hedge plant. You know, you're cutting off all your young wood. You're going to make a huge sacrifice to the production that next season. So we want to thin out old blueberries and get the oldest wood out of the plant. A lot of times with mine, I won't do a lot of pruning this time of year, but I might get a little piece of red flag tape and say, you know what? I picked a bazillion berries off this old gnarly piece of wood in the middle of my old blueberry. I'm going to tie a little flag on the stem in there that no one else will see, probably but me. That way I know next winter, if I'm going to thin that plant out, now I know what branch is like, okay, you're coming out of there, because that just makes room for more fresh wood that way. So hopefully a couple of tips on the berries. Now fruit, again, with the amount of rain we had this year, I would expect everyone is in sucker heaven. You know, we've got 3-4 foot shoots going every single direction here over the summer on pears, on apples, on plums, really on all of it. But if we take pears and apples, the spur type fruits first, you know, keep in mind, if I go out and I shave all that stuff off every single summer because I like an OCD tree like me, you're losing all of your 1-year-old wood, which means you don't have 2-year-old wood, which means no spurs, and I'm not going to have a lot of fruit coming down the pipeline. So what I would suggest is you look at those big old gnarly branches, and I might have 30 suckers going for the sunshine if it was out, and maybe I pick a few of those, most of them, to get all the way off down to the trunk. No stubs. I'm not leaving wood. I want them sawed off at the trunk, but I might leave one here and there. They're going in good directions, and cut those down and leave little 3 or 4 bud sections of short wood. That's what's going to produce spurs the second season, and then I get to pick, if that makes sense. So if I go out and saw that 1-year-old wood off, you're going to end up with a gap, and you're not going to have a lot of fruit come that second year. Apples and pears are almost a 2-year process. 1 year this wood comes up, we cut it down. The second year, I get my spurs out. Then that third year, those bloom and I pick them. And if we do this right every year, you never have a gap season to season. I hope that maybe made sense with me doing the hand thing. This is always a weird one to do on Zoom. Now, this other half of that is our cherries, plums, peaches, apricots, all the rest of that stuff. It's not a 3-year process with that. It's just a 1. So if I prune my cherry down, the growth comes up this summer, that sets all its flower buds, that blooms next year, and I get to pick cherries off, or the birds get to pick cherries off, whichever you like. So all those 1-year-old wood may be a little easier to manage the pruning, but it doesn't change the fact if I have 4-foot suckers going all over creation, I can go in there and thin some of those out and still knock some down to keep the shape that I want in that kind of low spreading crown and not let it get so tall. Probably pears are the worst, if you ask me. If you don't touch a pear, it's going to grow like a big spire, you know, massive wood going straight up in the air. And we need to knock that down so that we get a nice spreading shape that I can get in there and pick the fruit properly. Okay? Now, the last one here, maximize your flower power. As we get into the summer months, a lot of this is just deadheading, and it's still pruning, but we're going to deadhead different perennials. We're going to deadhead our annuals, keep our roses cut back. If a rose flower is spent, we go down the stem, we cut above a set of 5 leaves to an outside bud. We talked about roses, a bud on this side, a bud on that side. If I'm the center, I want to cut to that outside bud so that shoot comes out and goes away from the center, and I keep that nice open shape. But if I cut to 5 leaves, I keep my rose fed, I'm going to go through 4, 5, 6 bloom cycles a year. If I don't deadhead that rose, it's going to take a lot longer for that to decide, oh, let's send another flower up that I'll get to enjoy, 3 times as long later, kind of thing. So keep those cut back as well. Keep things from going to seed. A lot of my perennials, I buy ever blooming perennials. I'm not into the quick flash in the pan. Well, I got a couple things that are, but I want bloom consistently through the summer on something that'll come back. So if I do some deadheading, I brought a couple here to show you in a minute, I'll keep the flowers coming. Then at some point, September, I can go, okay, you know what? Let's let you start to dry, produce some seed. The birds will love me because they'll get to nibble on them. I'll drop some down if I want it to naturalize. Then I have more plants for 2023 that way. And again, pruning is all about encouraging growth, or in this case, more flower. Make sure you put some fertilizer down. That's always going to help that plant stay happy, get healthy new growth, and get back to the way that you want it. Now, just a quick little timeline, just so we're all on the same page here, because this is always a fast and furious pruning class. Put your pruners in the holster and walk away in August. I'm not out doing a whole lot of pruning in the late summer, fall, until we get past frost. That's the worst time of the year to prune. A little piece of dead wood, a branch is broken, all that's fine. Do what you got to do. But if I'm going to prune something back or thin it out or head it, whatever we're talking, we're going to try to avoid doing that August, September, October, November. Rest of the year, have at it. Leave the broadleaf plants alone. We mentioned this once, but I want to make sure that's clear. Nothing kills me more than driving around and seeing what could be a beautiful broadleaf evergreen healthy plant that somebody walked out mid-September and pruned into a little box, and now it sits half brown, half yellow, half dead through the winter, hoping that it comes back that next spring. You do that and we get a cold winter, we're going to have some issues. I saw a little bit of that come in this year with, we got a colder winter, and a lot of folks did not have some things come back that probably could have. Another big one with me is hydrangeas. A lot of people grow hydrangeas, me included. How do I deal with those? That's a plant I would never, ever, ever prune in the fall. This is something we want to do in spring. So we walk away from our hydrangeas, walk out the first part of March. That's when we want to cut down those stems to healthy buds, and then off we go for the year. Sometimes I'll walk out and take my dried flowers off. That's fine. Keeps the rain off them in case anything with snow or breakage in the winter. But I'm not going to do pruning, hard pruning of hydrangeas until we get to the spring months. Okay? Now, I had this last little thing here. You call it Trevor's Tips, call it whatever you want. These are some things, probably doing retail for 30 years, things that I hear more from homeowners and gardeners coming in, like, what should I do? Get a sharpener, make your life easy. That's a struggle for a lot of people. Until we discovered these little, again, the little Zenport sharpeners are excellent. Busting out the grinding wheel in the garage and getting the goggles on and setting up a whole thing to do 2 pruners is a pain in the butt, let's be honest. If I've got a little hand pruner, little hand sharpener, it makes it really easy. Sharpen your pruners. I use a lot of pocket saw. You saw me show my little one here. I think that's a great little tool, and bypass pruners. Again, I got big hands, may not be for everybody, but that little pocket saw to me is the superior little surgical tool to get into any little tight space and get a very accurate cut. Know your plants and when they bloom. If you don't know, ask us. We're always here to help. And then attack them accordingly. That's a big part of this class today. And I guess to start with, put your plant in the right place and avoid excessive pruning, because you're not going to win Mother Nature. I mean, I don't, again, it's your yard, it's your taste, it's not mine, but You know, having a tree that grows to 20 feet tall, butchered into a little 8-foot ice cube by the front door isn't pretty to me. You know, if it's your thing, more power to you. It's your yard, like I said. But why don't we get the right place for the right spot in the first place? Who wants to do more work in their yard? I'm not going to raise my hand. I like working in the yard, but I don't want to do more than I have to. And if I put the wrong place in the wrong, that's what I'm going to do. More work, more pruning. Oh God, I got to get that thing again every single year. So get the right plant and avoid the pruning in the first place. You know, never top trees. You know, fruit trees, Japanese maples, don't really get a leader. I'm not as worried about it. There's some others as well, but shade trees and conifers, we don't top. You know, if you topped it, then you're topping it for all eternity. You're going to keep it into a little hedge or something like maybe a cedar, arborvitae, whatever it is. But, you know, if I'm looking for a stately, beautiful specimen tree in my yard, topping it is not going to create that look. I hate to tell you. Looking to thin trees out is what I do. You know, I want natural beauty, natural structure, light, air moving through that I can have gardens underneath, you know, and that to me is thinning, you know, keeping that tree healthy, getting rid of dead wood, crossing branches, all the basics, but leaving that tree to attain its natural side. You know, I call it a chainsaw on a stick. You know, we're not gonna persecute you because you bought a chainsaw on a stick at Lowe's. I see them getting fired up all over my neighborhood on the weekends. They're great for some things. You want to save yourself some time, be careful with them, but that's a great choice for the boxwood hedge, the laurel, whatever. You know, if you don't like to do the hedge clipper thing, that's fine. But, you know, it's not a tool I see some people use on rhododendrons. Not a tool we're going to use on Japanese maples. It's not a tool we're going to, you know, turn our whole thing into an ice cube farm by shearing it back with a chainsaw on a stick. That's not going to get your natural beauty for you. How's that? You know, don't be a butcher. Learn how to do it right. You know, if you learn a couple simple things, hopefully this class, you know, kind of taught you some. Some year, I swear, I'm going to bring in and do like you know, we used to call this the good, the bad, and the ugly in the winter. And I could put up about 50 slideshows I've taken from all my years driving around and go, this is what not to do. This is what not to do, but we're not going to make it a negative class. But you'd see some pretty funny pruning jobs around if you've looked in yards. I've seen tunnels cut for power lines and trees. I've seen all kinds of fun things that just don't work quite right. So but like I said, the last thing there, you know, let the plant attain its natural beauty. That's the easiest way to go. So that's our web address. That's our email. As you can see, I'm home in my rainy back patio here today, but I have access to the store email. I'll be checking it all day today. You're more than welcome to send questions. You're more than welcome to send a picture, although I'll say it's really hard to look at your picture and say, oh, hey, you should do this and this and that. We can give you some tips by picture, but sometimes coming in and talking in person, we can kind of show you a couple tips and maybe do it that way too. But you're more than welcome to email us any questions today at all. Give me 1 second here. All right, now we're back. So I'm going to show you, are we doing okay on time? Oh, we're doing okay. I got a couple minutes. So I'm going to show you just a couple of plants. I ran up to the nursery after hours last night and borrowed a couple things that I don't have handy in my yard here, just to kind of show you. I know we'll kind of show you a couple branches as well. So can you, this might give you an idea kind of, it's a nice wet one now. So, you know, let's pretend I'm the trunk. You know, I simply borrowed this branch off Mr. Purple Ghost Maple behind me. Sorry about that, buddy, but it was a little low, so he didn't mind let me have one. So if I look at this, I just thought maybe I'd show you real quick. You know, is there anything wrong with that branch? It's hanging a little low, and I like my trees up so I can garden underneath it. But just as an example, if I look at that branch, when I say thinning, this is what I'm talking about. You know, I go down in the center here, and I decide to pick a branch here and there to thin this out and open that up. You know, I haven't cut this back. I haven't changed the direction. I'm not butchering this. But as I pulled little pieces out, I've opened up the structure. I've got more light in there. I've cut the weight down, and now I can see a little bit more. You know, is it simply thinning from the inside and let the top, you know, the end of the branches would be okay. That's fine too. You know, I can get rid of some of this here in the center, you know, and kind of open that up a little bit. Now I've totally changed the look of that big, gnarly, thick branch, and I've got more sun, more air. if I was going to head this back, let's do this in front of me here. You know, now I want to change the direction. Maybe this is out too far. So maybe I go down to right above the side branch and I say, I don't want you going out anymore. I want you to change this direction and go that way. So a lot of times, again, we talk about plants with opposite buds or alternate buds. I'm choosing one with alternate that's going the direction I want. Other plants, I might head back to where I have two and then I go exactly the same direction, but I bought myself a couple of years that way, okay? If we look at rhododendron, I borrowed this from the front yard. He's a late bloomer, so he's just hanging on to his last bloom here. So a lot of people ask, what do I do? You know, yes, I'm OCD, so I try to deadhead my rhodies, but I have a rule now. If you're higher than I can reach and I got to get a ladder, forget about it, because this one's about 15 feet out in the front yard here. So yes, I can easily grab my sticky truss. I'm about to clean up my patio today. And there it goes. You know, I'm done. I'm deadheaded. You can see where bloom's worn. I've already got new growth. But let's just say I want to skip that deadheading and I want to prune. Let's grab that branch and say, okay, you were way back into the trunk. You can see that. You know, I can cut this back honestly anywhere. Rhododendron has a massive amount of latent buds. Do I want to just kind of do this and this? Probably not. But if I want to skip my deadheading, you know, I could take these other shoots that are in here and I could go down and cut all this back, you know, and do it that way and cut myself off that growth. Yes, Trevor, you prune that. It looks terrible. If I wait 2 weeks, I've got new leaves out instead of flower bud, and off I am for 2023. If I do this in August, I'm probably going to get my growth. I don't have enough summer left to set my flower buds. So that's why I'm saying prune after bloom. You know, this is a great example here in the front. You know, I could have taken the flower off here. Let's just say I want to go down a little bit. I could cut it to there. I could go a little more to there. And again, if you look really close on rhododendron, I could find dormant buds anywhere in this old wood. And that's why probably the breaker of the rule is my 8-foot rhodie is buried in my garage. Let me cut it down to 2 feet. Let it start over again. You'll probably skip a year of flower. It probably doesn't look very swell when you're done, but some food goes on it and we do recover. You know, it's an easy way to kind of rejuvenate rhodies. When we bought this house about 20 years ago, that's what it was. Old rhodies that were burying the fence and most of the house. So some of them, yes, came out and got replaced by things I like, but I love rhodies too. So you can see, I flashed the camera here, you know, 10 foot, 15-foot tree in the front yard that I've limbed up and garden underneath now. I don't need all rhodies to be these big bushy things down to the ground. Limb them up, let them get big so that we can present a garden underneath them that way too. So, little side tip. So here's an azalea. I got azaleas all over my yard, but we're not gonna, if it wasn't raining, we could have maybe walked around with a little camera today and did some pruning in the yard. But this is azalea, just a typical evergreen azalea. I don't care what color it is. It could be any flavor in the world. If I want to keep this compact and maximize my flower, this is a head shear job to me. You know, you can see where my blooms were. I've already flushed out a couple inches of new growth. Every one of these little sprouts is going to set a flower bud, but I can knock this back down below that point, okay? And look, we probably look down, or, you know, the husband or the wife comes out and says, what have you done to my plant? Just wait, honey, it'll be much better. And now we can keep our azaleas super tight, super compact, and maximize flower. For every one of these stems, you can see right there. So I had one flower on the tip of that stem. This got pruned after bloom. I've got 6 coming up now. So now I have 6 flowers next year. That's where you see azaleas that are covered in bloom every season, because they get sheared back just a touch after flower. I do mine, if not every year, every other year for sure. Now, if you like the open kind of woodland azalea, there's nothing wrong with that either. Maybe that's kind of more your garden. Doesn't have to be a little sheared meatball. Mine don't look like art pieces. They're just kind of kept a little more compact that way, because then I maximize the flower. Now, if you look at conifers, because this is we're the evergreen state. You know, we rediscover our evergreen state here. You know, conifers is a tough one, because this is a plant then we have healthy growth. We've got some more. We go past 3 years, we don't have any growth. So conifer to me is the poster child. You can't get away with, I'm going to let it grow 5 years and then I want to go back to the way it was. That's not going to happen. It's going to be a light pruning each season or every other year to keep it a little bit smaller. I would recommend choosing the right conifer in the first place, so you're not having to worry about pruning as much. I think these are some of the tougher plants to prune, especially when we talk about whorl conifers. So in the whole world, this kind of sounds funny, in the whole world, there's whorl conifers. But if you think of your Christmas tree, I've got a central trunk and I've got rings or whorls of branches that grow in a nice symmetrical pattern. That's our typical evergreen: spruces, pines, firs, true firs, not Douglas fir, but true firs. Those to me are the hardest trees to prune. I want a central leader. I want a stately, magnificent evergreen. I'm not topping it, and I'm having a really tough time shearing it or cutting it back. Limbing it up, great. Garden underneath it kind of thing. But if I'm choosing the wrong one of those for the tight spot by the front door, I'm going to lose in a few years. That's not a plant that we can do a lot of easy pruning on. If we choose a random branch conifer, I'm going to have a much easier time. So if I look at, just brought a little seedling down because my pine's in the front yard. We're nowhere close. But if I look at this little Swiss stone pine, that's a whorl conifer. I've got a trunk that sends a leader up and keeps going, and I've got branches set in those rings again. Okay, these came out with candles. You can see kind of the two-tone growth here. Now I could have cut that candle in half or cut the candle off every other year, and now I could keep it a little slower growing and smaller. That's an easy option. Or easier is, buying things that I can shear again. This is a golden Japanese yew. This could be arborvitae. This could be hemlocks. This could be Douglas fir, cedars, a lot of other easy evergreens. I could take my hedge clippers or pruners of this and have a much easier time keeping this more compact, keeping it a little easier. And a lot of times these make the useful kind of coniferous hedges, a little yew hedge. Arborvitae everybody uses kind of as a living fence, but very, very easy to shear those back on the random branch type conifer. Okay. Now, if we look at just a couple more, I brought one of these just as an example. So here's a spirea. Everybody knows spirea. So you see the recognize, oh, I have one of those. I know what it's called, right? So I have these in my yard too. This is a great little shrub, but you can see these are just getting ready to bloom, and I've got some beautiful foliage color. When these are brown or dry, I'll take my hedge clippers, cut a few inches below those flowers, round this off. Now I'll get brand new orange red growth, just like spring. I'll set flower buds and I'll bloom again in that mid-late summer, early fall time frame. So you need a double season out of conifer, right at the spirea. Now, if you look, last one here is boxwood. I like boxwood. Some people don't like boxwood, but it's easy. So this is a boxwood, and the main difference is that if I pull a little branch off to the side, I don't have to spend an hour, going, oh, well, I don't like that one piece and I don't want that one piece, and I can sit there for days and do that. I can grab my hedge clippers and turn this into whatever shape I want, or tuck it back a little bit, because there's so many buds on one stem. I don't have to be as exact. If you saw me with the maple of the Rhodie, I don't have that option. I'm going to try to be a little more accurate on where I prune above a bud so I go the direction I want. This is something I don't have to worry about nearly as much. Okay. There's a couple prunings. So I brought, one is lavender. Now we mentioned lavender earlier. These are blooming, so I'm not going to prune it yet. Plus I have to take this back to work, or they'll come get me, right, Nicole? So we got a lavender. Ooh, it smells good. So if I have this in my yard, these flowers have gone brown. I want to take my clippers and I'm going to cut down just into the foliage here and remove these, because now I'll have another bloom cycle. Do it again, another bloom cycle. If we don't prune, there's one lady drives me crazy in Marysville. I drive by her house all the time on the way to work. She's got 3 foot of dead wood a little frosting of lavender flowers on top of it on the white picket fence, and it just doesn't look like lavender to me. Now, maybe she likes it, that's fine. But if I want those big pin cushions of lavender that bloom 2 or 3 times repeatedly over the summer, that's shearing it. Cut the flowers, bring them in the house, dry them. There's a lot of good uses for lavender, but I can keep those pruned, keep my plant compact, and keep maximum flower. If I had any heather left, it would be exactly the same discussion. A lot of people hear me say heather and they're like, ooh, heather, I don't want heather in my yard. I've had that before. Heather's a great plant, and it's an awesome, the ericas that bloom over the winter are fabulous, but we're coming out of winter, those are done blooming. What do? If we don't want that donut, you know, the woody center on the heather with all the growth that kind of sprawls open, if we lightly clip those, just like the lavender, cut those dried flowers off, keep that plant compact, you're going to have a fabulous dense heather that's zero maintenance. You know, it'll take you 5 minutes to walk out and just shear back a heather real quick in the springtime when we come out of winter for the winter bloomers. And then the same thing for the summer bloomers, a little bit of clip after they bloom. I'm going to be a much more attractive heather long-term and maximize my flower. Now, the last couple perennials, you know, as an example, so here's a great meadow sage. You know, this is one that just started blooming here a month ago. Like, well, man, why would I buy that? The flowers are already kind of dry. The bees have done their thing. You know, it's done. Well, no, that's the point with the perennials like this. If I take 2 seconds, you can already see, if you look really close, new flower buds starting on the side shoots. But if I go in here and I just take a second and deadhead this, you know, cut those spikes as they're spent, you know, it's going to look like, let me just get it done here and you can see. That one's not quite done yet, so I won't cut him. The bee will be not happy with me, right? You know, if I left the one because he's still blooming, but I cut off all those dried flower spots, here comes more, and all those places that I just pruned, now we keep blooming. If I let that go to seed, the plant is going to be sweet. I'm going to shut down, seed myself up, try to reproduce myself for the next season, and I'm done for the year. But if I keep that tipped a little bit, I'm going to keep this blooming all the way through the summer. That could be, you know, the salvias, blanket flowers, really any of these good sunny repeat blooming perennials. A little bit of deadheading will really, really help you maximize your flower. Okay. All right. Still made it. 2 minutes to spare, Nicole. So real quick, you know, with all the classes, I won't be up at the store till Monday. When my quarantine ends, I'll be up there Monday if you want to come see me then. But we will have all the tools are on special, so 20% off all pruning supplies, the sharpeners, everything I've talked about here today. We got plenty of it at the store, so take advantage of the special. A couple things I'll mention in particular. I kept talking. This is a great sharpener. Again, this KS06. We got a bunch of them at the store. That's a really easy sharpener to use. I can grab my blade, just run it across there. You can use it on knives, use it on anything. That's a sweet deal. And we put these on half price. So I got one of these at the house too, but this is a little pocket sharpener. I can just keep my pocket if I'm out pruning for a while. This has got ceramic and tungsten blades. So even easier, I can just sit here and do this for 2 seconds like an old sharpening stone. These would be $5 at half price. So we've got whatever I got left at the store. Make a mad dash down there today and find Wes. He'll sell you one. $5. We put them on half price for the store. I mentioned those pull pruners. If you look back at the show here and you see that pair of red one that I took a picture on the garage floor with the chain. Now we have 2 styles of pull pruners. The little bit lighter duty ones, maybe you only use it a couple times a year. They're probably fine. Those will be 20% off. If you want that really high-end professional one with the chain lock, I think we have 6 left right now. Those we put on special for $150 even. That's usually like a $220 purchase for a really good, long, thick pull pruner. Take advantage of that. If you want a pair of pull pruners, that one is too big to leave in the yard waste, so you would have them forever. Keep them in the garage. They're really easy to use, I think, and you don't have to be super strong, super leveraged to use a good quality pull pruner. So we do have some of those down there as well if you want to take advantage of that. So 20% off all those goodies, half price on those little pocket sharpeners, and then you can have the big high-end Corona pole pruners for $150. I'd encourage you to come down and check those out. That's a really good discount. So do we got some more questions?
Always, because you just
some good ones.
Yeah, you give us such good information, and then it sparks, you know, these things that are going on in our yard. So we always have questions. So as we go through this, there's a little Q&A chat bubble at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question, go ahead and throw it up in the chat, and you know, I'll mention it to Trevor, and we'll get an answer. A lot of the stuff we did today, we wanted to make sure that we did in this format so that everybody can kind of hear, and it's easier to answer pruning questions verbally than it is to type things out. So a lot of you, you know, they were asking questions. I just said, I'll ask him at the end, and thanks for waiting so patiently, because it's a lot easier to kind of answer it in this format. Real quick, before we start questions, can you tell us the brand of that sharpener again? I know you mentioned like the name of it, but what's the brand?
Yeah, that's all Zenport.
Okay.
So we found, you know, I have Zenport pruners. I got Felcos. You can, I don't know, call it the Rolex and the Timex. You know, Felco, there's no substitute for if you want a high-end pruner and you won't lose them. You know, I've always had Felco number 2s. There's all kinds of options. But honestly, Zenport makes a really high-quality pruner for less than half the price. The 2 sharpeners, it's the same company, but you've got the kind of fancier handled one, which we sell hundreds of these a year at the nursery. I thought this pocket one was pretty handy, but we're going to carry one going forward and get rid of the cheap option. So you get the lucky thing at half price. So $5 for those little pocket sharpeners are pretty easy to use.
Cool. Thank you. That was my guess. So I nailed it. Nice. It's the little things. Okay. So we've got some specific questions that hopefully apply to people who may have the same plant in their yard. A non-flowering quince that's growing more laterally than vertically. What do you do to help kind of retrain or, you know, prune that?
Well, quince is the classic, I don't mean this in a negative way, but it is the classic suckering shrub. So if I plant a quince in the ground, it's going to pop up stems and kind of want to go horizontal and sprawl everywhere. I would attack the base first. I mean, if you're trying to get this up off the ground, it's always going to want to go up and then flange back down. But I would look at the base and not maybe worry about cutting the main plant off so much. It's going at the base of it, trying to get rid of entire trunks at the ground level. So if it's spread into a thicket, and that's what's kind of sprawling out on the ground a little lower, I would try to get some of that sawed off or lopped off down at the or below the soil level and kind of get it back to a smaller crown. I'm going to smile as I say it's not going to end your battle, because I have a quince on the bank on the other side of the house here, and that is what it does. So most of the quince are going to want to spread a little bit more horizontally. If it's not blooming, that would surprise me a little bit, because that's the reason I left it, because I like the quince bloom in spring. It's very pretty. But it was an old wood bloomer. So if you're out there, you know, pruning it midsummer, late summer, fall, winter, you're probably cutting off most of your blooming wood. So try taking some of that stuff off the ground level now. If you're going to head it back at all, to get it back to a little bit narrower is what I'm thinking the goal of this discussion is. Do that now, let it regrow, harden those buds off, and I think you'll get a little bit of flower, better flowering next spring come as well.
Excellent. Somebody inherited a flowering plum that has a ton of water shoots on it. How many water shoots can you take off before it triggers new ones? You know, how do you go about if you have just a ton of them? What do you do?
Well, again, you're kind of fighting the same nature of the same tree, whether it's the plum, the cherry, all that stuff is going to water sprout a little bit. There's not a rule. I mean, you could take them all out. It's not going to matter to the tree, but it doesn't mean you're not going to get them back. Now, again, I would never leave stubs. If I'm taking it out, I want to right down to the major branch. Don't leave stubs. You're going to have 3 of them shoot back up. Inevitably, it will happen again. I mean, that's just the way plums tend to grow. So I don't want you to think, oh, well, Trevor told me to cut these out and I'm done forever. That's not going to be the answer. It'll get better. And I have a feeling maybe that if you've got an excessive amount of water sprouts or suckers, whatever you want to call it, in the crown, it's usually indicative that maybe that tree didn't get pruned for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 years or whatever it is. And then we decided we're going to cut it back hard. That's going to really encourage a lot more of that. So again, try to do a little bit every season or every other year even versus maybe letting it go for a while.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. I think you talked about this. I think this question got asked before you mentioned it, but somebody's got what they think is a yew that's now over 15 feet tall. What's the best way to go about pruning that?
Well, I'm guessing there you wanted to come down in height. I would not break the 1/3 rule on a conifer. So, I mean, if you want to be safe, I could cross my fingers and toes, and you're probably okay if you went farther than that. But try to go a third, and we could literally dive into the top of that thing. I'm guessing she's talking about an Irish yew, maybe a big, tall, narrowish one. You know, I can get up on a ladder probably if you're at 15 feet. You know, try to get up there about 10 feet in the air. I just did it with some massive arborvitae that were getting a little tall on the other side of my house, and dug into the center and sawed out some of those big central trunks to get the height down. It'll shoot back up and grow back up as time goes on. But this is a great time of year to do that.
Okay, excellent.
If she's talking about the sides, use the hedge clippers. Use a really easy prune like boxwood with needles, essentially. So if you're talking about kind of keeping it down, or maybe it's a spreading one, there's a lot of yews around, use the hedge clippers for that. Don't cut to bare wood ever, especially on the sides. You may be stuck with some bare wood forever. So stay where you have needles, but that's an easy one again to shear into a very tidy shape.
Gotcha. So somebody was talking about a cedar that they have that near an apartment complex that got trimmed back pretty harshly. And so now they're wondering if they can prune it into kind of a hedge, you know, on their side, not the apartment complex. If it's already been kind of hacked back and kind of broke the 1/3 rule, can you know, kind of help it a little bit more to make it what you want?
Yeah, I mean, again, we saw a lot of hedging cedars, and again, that's a tree. You know, it's a big tree depending on what variety it is, but it doesn't mean, you know, it's been topped, the damage is done. So yeah, shear it. I mean, that would make a great thick hedge. Again, it's the same answer as that yew. Be really careful with conifers because I have to stay out. You know, if I'm a cedar, I have 1, 2, 3-year-old needles on there, and then I'm bare. So once I pass the point of bare, you don't want to prune to that point. You're not going to magically get a new piece of growth out. So make sure you're really careful how far you go in as far as pruning, and stay out where you've still got needles, or we're going to have a bare spot.
Okay. When's the best time to prune twig dogwood? I know you mentioned flowering dogwoods, but what about twigs?
No, it's a great question because I use those. I've got a bunch on my bank. I have for the birds. I love that plant. I got a couple on my regular landscape that look pruned because they're part of the yard. You know, if you want what I do, you know, I'll dive in the winter typically. Again, start at the base, look for bad branches, bad angles. You know, dogwood kind of grows a little crazy, twig dogwood. So I'll always attack the base first, thin out some growth at the base to get the structure I want back. If we're talking about summer, especially this year with the wet spring, a lot of growth. I looked this morning, my ivory halo variegated one I have in the other landscape is just kind of weeping a little bit because it's wet, it's heavy, it got a lot of foliage with the wet spring. So I will cut those back a bit. I like using my twigs in Christmas wreaths and some other things in the holidays. I think it's a pretty plant for that purpose. And I like the twig color just looking at it in the wintertime with all the greens we have around here. So I attack the base, the structure issue in the winter. In the summer, maybe I'm taking my edge clippers out and kind of rounding that growth off. If I got too much growth up, I can always cut those back a bit. The freshest growth is the brightest color wood. So that kind of serves my purpose. You know, I want a little tidier growth, a little more compact, but I like those little 10, 12 inch pieces of bright red wood to use for the holidays as well.
Interesting.
Then we get down for the Christmas wreaths down at Sunnyside.
Yeah, right. What a great addition to that. I love that. What about Japanese maples? Can you do a little bit of pruning in the summer?
Yep. No, it's a great time of year. I mean, if we look at, you know, Japanese maples is one of my original plant addictions. So I don't know how many do I have in this yard. I'd probably have to spend some time counting between pots too. But lace leaves is really hard. You have to get your lace leaf, your weeping Japanese maples done in the winter. You cannot look at a lace leaf right now and go, where do I prune? Maybe it's on the grass. Something's got to happen. All right, temporarily cut it up and get it out of your way, and then you can fix it next winter. But to me, those are almost an art piece. So let's just kind of set that aside for the winter months. The trees, it's a great time of year to do because, again, I looked at mine, with the wet weather, a big flush of growth this year. Are they hanging too low? Are they not upright? Do I need to limb them up? Do I want to thin them out? I think summertime right now, early summer is the superior time to thin out maples. Every single one in this yard, and I got a few big ones that I planted years ago, will all get thinned here in the next 2-3 weeks because now I can see where all the leaves came out. I can stand there underneath it and go, I've got no light. I've got no sun. What am my garden doing underneath here? And I can get up into the crown with that fancy pole pruner and take a piece here and a piece there. I'm not butchering it back. I'm not doing anything crazy, but I'm opening it up a little bit so that I can get, again, better light, better air circulation, and I've got a happy garden underneath it.
Okay, good to know. So this is a kind of big question, and we're definitely not going to dive into it necessarily. So try and answer this on the surface level here. In terms of if somebody wants to propagate a rhodie, okay, so don't jump into that because that is a whole class in itself, and we don't need to, right? But what would you use when you prune something off? What would you use in terms of propagation?
Yeah. Well, you would always get, I can answer this really quickly 2 ways. So I can always get rooting hormone. We carry a root tone down at the store. It's not as easy with some plants as just nicking the bark and dipping it in there and throwing it in the ground. I mean, that's not going to happen for a lot of plants. Rhodie will not happen that way. So you want to take kind of a fresher cutting and you can try to get it to root. I'll tell you, a really easy way to do with rhododendron, and I don't know, what the situation is. If you have one, you're moving, I want a piece, my neighbor or my friend, whatever it is. If you've got the time, take a lower branch and just carefully, not break it off, but just carefully lean it down to the ground, put a big rock on it, take a little handful of compost and just kind of pile it around that rock and just walk away. If you come back this fall, I'll be able to cut that branch, and where that wood was on the soil, I'm going to develop a little root system. Now I got something I can go transplant. So there's an easy way they kind of call it layering. You can do that with a lot of quite a few different shrubs.
Well done. Way to take that. And yeah, that's good.
I've done it both ways before. The layering's really easy.
There you go.
I've rescued a few from my parents' old place that way, and I will probably do it again.
Nice.
Okay. If I ever move out of this yard, I can tell you there's about 6 rhododendrons that'll get layered and be coming with me that next year, because there's a few here that I will want again for sure.
Yeah, can you just take the whole yard with you if you ever move? Maybe it'll never happen, who knows. Yeah. Okay, kind of another big question. If you want to try and train or trim something that is a bush into a tree, or vice versa, a trim into a bush, or a tree into a bush, do you have quick tips, easy tips on, some tips on how to go about that?
Well, I think the bush into a tree is much easier. If I limb something up, thin it out, and let it get off the ground, I can turn, what a lot of us, buy as a shrub, a lilac. I should pan the camera out here. My lilacs are got to be 18 feet tall here at the back of the house. So, I mean, a lot of the little shrubs are really easy to turn into trees. I mean, even rhododendron, if the front yard one here is about 15 feet tall, that's an easy one. If you're talking about butchering a tree, and I'm going to use that word butcher, but if we're going to butcher a tree into a shrub, that's going to be a little tougher ask to me. I'd probably want to know what tree, quote unquote, they're trying to turn into a shrub, and I'm sure some of it can be done, but that's a little tougher ask, I think. But shrub into tree, keep it limbed up, air it out a little bit, let it get some height to it. That's an easy one on a lot of plants.
Okay, cool. What about a strawberry tree? Somebody's got one that's pretty dense and they want to thin it out. Can they do it now? When's the right time?
Yeah, it's a great time to do. Again, that broadleaf evergreen discussion, I could rewind, you know, till this year or probably a little later. But, you know, once I got into mid-April, I would always feel safe attacking anything evergreen. So you could even make yourself a note. You can get it done a little earlier next year if you want, but you're not too late. Absolutely thin that thing out. If I had a strawberry tree, and I wish I had one, I could have had one of those to my yard. I would want it to be open so I could see the bark, see the interest of it, because that's a sweet plant. Those bloom in the fall, keep in mind, and then they fruit in the fall, winter, into the early spring. So don't do it as soon as you can. And I don't know that I would ever shear it back, because then I'm probably not going to get a lot of action that year. But if you're talking about thinning it out, I think that's ideal. You're still going to have all that tip growth to bloom out and get you the nice fruit set for the winter months.
Okay, cool. Tips and tricks for keeping arborvitae looking neat.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've had mine in 20 years, and I kind of bit the bullet. I called it my mountain range. It was the only plant, really didn't care if I was OCD in a straight line. I kind of had the mountain peaks going. It blocks the church that's over here a couple blocks away. You know, and I hit mine this year, first time in that I've been in for almost 20 years. So I hit mine pretty hard. You know, I said, you know what, I'm going to get back down here to 6 or 7 feet. It looks like I've pruned them right now because they don't have a nice clean look on the top. But after they flush out, you know, I'll have a great dense hedge again. Again, you know, how far are they going back would be my question. You know, if I've got something 12 feet tall, I'm not going to cut it to 6. I'm going to try to follow that 1/3 rule. You know, I was at, you know, 10 foot probably on the highest ones of mine. So I didn't mind going back to 6 or 7. You know, I'm not technically breaking my crazy 1/3 rule, but I wouldn't go in half or anything. The question kind of sparked my interest because they said, what do you do with arborvitae and keep them tidy? So I'm guessing the tidiness is what's getting them. I can always shear the sides if I really want to keep it narrow. Again, no cutting into to bare wood. You're going to have a dead area and it's not going to fill back in. So lightly clipping it every year would be ideal. Topping it, we're fine with that if you just don't break the 1/3 rule. I have a feeling maybe like mine did a little bit this summer or this winter. You got pieces that kind of peel out here and there when we get a heavy snow. I got most of mine. I forgot the new ones I added a few years ago, but you can get, we sell it at the store. It's an easy little thing called chain lock. You'll never see it. It's a little thick plastic, looks like a chain that I could take in there and kind of wrap those branches together and then lock the chain, and that holds it there. Now, if I get some heavy snow, it's not going to allow that piece to kind of splay out and open up a little bit.
Okay. So speaking kind of on this note, in terms of, you know, conifers, so if you've got some lower branches that are brown or have brown spots, do you recommend pruning those out or?
Well, I'd probably want to see a picture. I mean, if it's brown, it's done. I mean, that's an easy answer. The spots, I don't know. Are we fighting a little touch of needle cast or a disease of some kind that maybe we want to spray? I'd want to check that. You know, it's not, you know, any plant, you know, is going to get shaded out and have some dead wood. It's not that the plague has gotten in. You've got to burn the whole yard down and start over again. If it's a totally brown branch, it needs to come out. We go to the trunk, we pull it out of there, and we send it to the great compost heap in the sky. If, you know, it's kind of brown, is it shaded? Is it underneath? Is it crowded? Is it spotted? You know, maybe send us a picture and I can look at it and say, yeah, you know what, I would just get rid of that. Or, hey, you might have a little touch of needle cast or something. Why don't we get a spray on that to make sure it doesn't get worse, you know, kind of thing. Because there's no, you know, we kind of joke at the nursery a lot of times, whether you want to call it the wonder shrub, the wonder conifer, the wonder whatever, there is no such thing as a perfect plant. I hate to tell you, I've tried to find it. I have a few that come close, but it's a tough find. And we're always going to have a little branch out of whack, a little piece of brown here and there, something to take care of to keep it looking its best. So I maybe send a picture, because the spotting part of it kind of gets my ears up a little bit. Maybe we want to look at it, make sure nothing else is going on.
Okay, good. No, I sent him the email, so he'll hopefully email us. So we talked about how you had those really great diagrams about how to prune some of the bigger caliper branches. What about in terms of timing? You know, there's somebody who's got ones that are branches over an inch thick on a styrax and a birch. When's the right time to do those?
You know, again, I like right now in summer, you know, again, it's not the end of the world to do it in the winter, but excuse me, you know, take the birch. You know, the birch isn't really a bloomer. It's just a shade tree. It's got great bark. Excuse me one second. You know, that I'd say go ahead and do anytime. You know, the styrax, if it's not in bloom right now, it just finished blooming. So again, prune after bloom. If I cut that back right now, thin it out, I have the summer, regrow branches, set flower buds, and I've got happy plant again in 2023. So you could have asked me, you know, styrax, crabapple, flowering cherry, magnolia, the dogwoods are blooming, all that stuff that blooms on old wood and it's coming out of winter right now. When it's done blooming, now is the time to head it back to do what I want to do. Thinning out, we can do anytime, but I think you'll have an easier time heading it back this time of year. And then winter time, going back to revisit that and saying, okay, how did my tree reshape? Do I need to thin a couple pieces out, correct a direction, whatever, and then off we go for another season.
Okay, good to know. What about hibiscus? Any advice on those? Perhaps hardy hibiscus for us here in this area.
Well, and you know, again, I'm just going to touch hardy hibiscus. You know, I have Rose of Sharon out in the front yard. You know, a woody hardy. Some people call it Althea. You know, that's a midsummer bloomer, so I'm not pruning mine right now because it's in the setting flower buds on new wood, not old wood, but that's growing buds right now that I'm going to see flowering. Usually it's by early July. This year probably going to be a little later July, but July and into August, you know, I've got a summer blooming shrub that looks great. So I can prune that coming out of winter if I want to cut it back. Again, new wood comes up, sets flower buds, and off we go. So I would not do it now today. Wait till it finishes blooming, you know, midsummer or so. Or again, wintertime, I can go in and attack any of the structure issues and cut it back if I need to.
Okay, cool. What about if you were gonna try and shear and shape ivy? What tool do you think is the best to do that, and when?
All right, I'll keep my personal belief on ivy aside here. Wow, shear ivy back. You know, probably, I don't know where it is, if he's growing it as a ground cover, if it's on a fence, if it's growing up trees, hopefully not up the trees, but ivy will take whatever you let it take. So shearing it back, you know, probably hedge clippers or a chainsaw and a stick might be a little easier with that one because there's going to be a lot of intertwining wood. I don't know that either of them is going to do maybe the whole job you want it to, because again, the vines and twines and it's going every direction. It's not a typical shrub, but ivy will grow no matter what you do. So I mean, honestly, you could probably do what you want with ivy and it's going to come back and say hello again.
Cool. So we talked about roses. Can you remind us, you know, how far back we can prune them when they're done blooming?
You know, I can cut stems down, you know, okay, well, let's do it this way. I'm not talking about climbing roses in this instance, because I bought a climbing rose because I wanted to get up and cover something. So I'm not cutting that back nearly as hard. So let's throw that aside. Shrub rose, hybrid tea, floribunda, mini, all the rest of it. Yes, do whatever you want to it. I would probably ask you this. If you came into the store and said, what do I do with my rose? It's on its first bloom cycle. I can cut it back now. I would probably look to see if I had black spot, mildew, any foliage issues. And if I did, I would really try to get it cut back a little farther, because that gets rid of some of that growth as well, and then spray it, and then off we go again. If I'm not fighting that, the question is probably for you. How tall do you want that rose here in mid-late summer, or would you rather have something a little smaller? It's not going to matter to the rose how far those individual canes come down, as long as you cut above a set of 5 leaves and try to stay those outside buds so that I don't have that rose crossing back into the center again. You see what I mean? I almost want that, if I had my hand out, I want that open center with all those canes kind of coming up like a candelabra. I don't want this kind of mess going with the rose, or I'm going to fight more disease just because of air circulation. So cut it back as far as you want. I mean, I got a shrub rose out in the bank out front that, probably reaches 4 or 5 feet in the summer and 8 feet across. If you came by in the winter, it's about 8 inches tall by 1 foot across. And here it comes again, headed off with another season. So, I mean, you could cut them back hard. It probably would be dictated by your spot at your house.
Okay. I'm letting them know that they can email us, if there's additional questions, but that was a great answer. Thank you.
Well, and just keep in mind with the rose in particular, it's all about food. You've got to feed your roses. If I prune, I want to feed every 6 weeks on a rose anyway during the growing season, but you absolutely do that if you prune it back, because that's going to help you get healthy growth and then another set of flower quicker.
Cool. Last 2 questions. Ready? We're getting there. So thanks for hanging in there, everybody. So boxwood, this is, I'm guessing, somebody who doesn't live around here. They said that their temperatures have already been in the 80s this spring. Man, wouldn't that be nice this time of year for us? Right? I know. So they mentioned that temperatures are a little high already in the spring for them. Can they still top off a boxwood hedge, or, even with the temperatures as high as they are?
I still think you're okay. I mean, you probably, ideally, I'm guessing they're probably southeast somewhere. That's even a more common plant than up here. It's still, keep it watered. I'd still put some food on it. Nothing changes, but I don't see any reason you still can't give that a light clip. I would try up here. It doesn't matter quite as much. I don't know if we'll see 80 till August, but maybe in your neck of the woods. That's a little note on the gardening calendar. Probably right coming out of winter would be a great choice in most of the southeast to get those things pruned back, because then we got a little cooler weather to reflush the growth, harden it off, and we got happy summer plant. But yeah, I'd say have at it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Last but not least, what about, can you thin out, somebody's got a young red oak tree that's out by the street. Can you thin that out right now?
Oh, it's a great time to thin all trees, and that's a smart gardener right there. Give him the gold star, because if you, I heard the key word, young. I think most people go buy a tree, plop it in the ground, walk away for 10 years, and then come back and say, what is this thing? What do I do to fix that? If you do some thinning, some training, keep what you want, limit up when they're young, you're going to have way less work to do 10, 20 years down the road. You've set the whole structure for that tree for the lifetime. So absolutely go out, thin that thing out. You're doing yourself a world of good for the long term. Nice. Gold star, Barbara. Nice work. Love that. Way to be on top of your tree. Babs. Babs gets the gold star. Right? So I think we answered everything. We always talk about this, that there's always things that come up, when you're out in the yard and you think you've got all the knowledge you need, and then you start pruning and realize, oh, wait, maybe I'm not as sure as I thought. Just reach out to us. We're here 7 days a week by phone or email. You can easily find us on Google. We're happy to help. We have an incredible team of experts here in the nursery, not just Trevor, although he is so knowledgeable. But, we're really grateful to have an entire team, that you don't get to see on camera, that's more than happy to help, whether you're here in the nursery or you send us an email with some pictures or a phone call, whatever. We're happy to help and talk about plants. So reach out. Also, we really appreciate you joining us today. We've got some other classes on the calendar. We're, to be honest, still kind of deciding whether those are going to happen or not. So we'll keep you posted. Hopefully we'll see you next weekend. If not, we'll see you back in a few weeks with Trevor. So watch our website on our classes page to kind of stay in touch with what's happening with our classes. But we have a great lineup for the whole rest of the year. We do these most weekends out of the year. So there's lots of great topics to come. Again, check us out on our website. You can see all of those. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we can bring some back in person. We're trying to wade through that. But if we do, we'll still record them so that they're still accessible to people, whether you can make it into the nursery or not. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule today. We love spending time with you, even though we can't see your faces. But thanks for taking time out of your schedule. And we hope to see you around next time. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.